back to Babies on Backorder. This is Isabelle, and today I will be leading the episode. We will be talking about the effects that IVF has on the individual themselves going through it, their family members, their loved ones, their partner, etc. Just basically how it affects the relationships in general. We'll also kind of tap into the 4 principles of bioethics because it does relate to the discussion. And although we have already talked about that in previous episodes, I feel like it's a little different when you can relate it to a real person and a real situation that they went through. Today I will be interviewing somebody very close to me, and this is very personal because this is such a sensitive and personal topic. I will be keeping it completely anonymous and dubbing her voice just to make sure that her privacy is respected. I also wanted to put a disclaimer that there may be sudden pauses, and that is just me editing out any info that could identify this person or is very specific to their situation. So now let's jump into the interview. What prompted your decision to try IVF?
After 5 years of trying naturally and exploring my medical options like a fallopian tube wash, medicated with Clomid and 5 rounds of IUIs, the doctor suggested that the next round would be IVF. So that was what we went with his suggestion.
And then can you explain what those other ones were? The other treatments you did?
Yes, so I did a fallopian tube wash, which is pretty much they go in just to make sure that my fallopian tubes weren't blocked. So they go in and they kind of do like a dye and wash out your fallopian tubes. And one of them, my left one, I believe, was clogged, I guess you can say, or not properly functioning like it should be. So with that, they were able to like wash it out and make sure that it had like a flow of. So they did that, and then I did the medication of IUIs, which was being I would have to drive to Tucson, and I would inject myself the night before, go to Tucson, and then my husband at the time would do his little business in a cup, and then they would inseminate me because they had kind of given us the idea that maybe I was very acidic, meaning that I was killing sperm on contact. So they gave me this option, and it was going to bypass all of everything and just kind of, guide the sperm into my uterus. And I did 5 of those, and out of the 5, they all were unsuccessful as well.
As someone who underwent IVF, did your provider make sure that your rights as a patient were clear and understood?
Yes, both my OB/GYN and the IVF doctor were, they give you all the information you needed and kind of just tell you what in vitro is and what were my next options. So I went to Dr. Jalebi, who's in Tucson, and I did the 5 medicated IUIs there with him. And then when he suggested, I think it's time to do in vitro, they give you all the information about pricing and stuff. And while in the US, it's very, very expensive. So after careful consideration and talking to my OB and talking to him, I decided to go to Mexico. So I went with Dr. Luna and Hermosillo, and she also provided all the information I needed, kind of gave us out, like, this is what we need to do, this is the plan, and hopefully it works. So I did that in Mexico, and it was unsuccessful as well.
And then why did you go to Tucson? Is there no clinics in?
Correct. So there is just the OB/GYN doctors here in Austin, and everything. The specialists are in Tucson. So Dr. Duran, who was my OB, he gave me a reference to Dr. Jalebi in Tucson.
Okay. Next question. What effect did going through IVF have on your relationship with family, friends, etc.? What was your support system like?
So obviously it's very, very stressful. I was married at the time, and I kind of feel like it did kind of put a strain on my marriage because we wanted this to happen so bad, and it was not happening in our favor. So my husband at the time did join my every appointment when we were going to Tucson. However, when we went to the appointments in Mexico, he kind of became very distant. So a lot of the things that we did in Mexico, I did it with the support of my parents and my aunt and uncle. So they were my best support that I had at that time.
Do you know why he chose not to attend the appointments? Like, was it hard for him or just what prompted that?
Honestly, I have no idea. He kept saying it was because of work, which I kind of I get, but at the same time, he did go to like the main appointment where we met the doctor, and he did go to the day that they what do you call it? They extracted um, my eggs. Sorry, how I go. When they extracted my eggs, he did go to that appointment. But when it went down to actually doing like the transfer day, he wasn't there. So
How did him not being there for such a big day affect you? Was it harder or more stressful?
oh yeah, absolutely, it was way harder.
What effects did going through IVF have on you personally, physically, and or mentally?
Of course, it affected me tremendously. You know, I was taking a lot of medication. My hormones were through the roof. I was emotional a lot. Um, it comes back to like, you know, my job as a woman is to get pregnant and be able to, you know, conceive naturally. So having to go through these measures kind of like, you know, made me very sad and made me, you know, I don't know, basically sad. Like I was pressed for a little bit. Yeah. So I kind of have a little bit of doubt in me where I think I can't get pregnant even now. Um, yeah, so who knows? Hopefully I can, and if not, well, I guess we'll see what other, you know, measures I can take to be able to have children.
Girl, it will happen.
Oh,
I know it. I know it.
hopefully.
I kind of want to go back to the question about the family support. And I was wondering if you could dive more into the way your mom, your dad, your brother, people close to you like that supported you and how they did that.
Yeah, so with my mom and my dad, so they would actually, because Hermosillo is about 4 hours away from, they took time off of work. They went with me. They drove me to know Hermosillo. And basically, my mom was in the room with me the entire time, you know, kind of telling me everything was going to be okay, and they were very, very supportive, you know, going through all of this that I had to go through. My brother not so much because he was in college playing baseball and stuff, so he would just send me the text messages of, "Hey, you got this, sis. Like, don't worry about it. You'll be good," and stuff like that. But honestly, my parents and my aunt and my uncle, they were, you know, truly the real MVPs of this. They drove me to every appointment, especially my aunt. She would, to my appointments that were just in Mexico. She would drive me to those appointments without my husband or with my husband.
So you shared that some of your appointments were about 4 hours from home or an hour, depending on which doctor you were seeing. How did that affect you having to travel so far for care? How, like, was it hard?
Yeah, so you know when we had to go to the 4 hours to Hermosillo, we did have to stay there a couple nights just to make sure, like, okay. To Tucson, it wasn't so bad because it is an hour. So those appointments would um would drive me to them.
I guess what I'm asking is how was it having to do something so physically demanding, a whole surgical procedure, and then not being able to go home, but having to drive hours?
So the one since we stayed in Mexico for about 3 days, I was okay because we stayed at a hotel and we took it easy and we just made sure that I was fine. It wasn't comfortable to drive a little bit afterwards just because it's Mexico and I'm a little paranoid sometimes. Yeah. So having to drive back, I was kind of like on a little bit of edge, but it was a safe drive. The freeway over there is a lot better now, so it wasn't so bad. But I could definitely tell you that I would have not been able to come and go. Like, even though it's only 3 hours, it's like a trip to Phoenix. Yeah. I wouldn't have been. I had to. I'm glad we stayed.
Do you wish that you could have just done it in your hometown?
Um. Well, I couldn't have because there's no specialist here, so I still would have had to have done it in Tucson. Part of me thinks that maybe it would have been a little bit more successful in Tucson just because I don't know. I just feel like maybe it would have been more successful here in the U.S. I feel like I would have understand the doctor a little bit more because yes, I speak Spanish, but there's a lot of things, a lot of medical vocabulary in Spanish that I was kind of like not really sure what he was talking about. Yeah. And so I had to really like pay attention, or I would look at my mom and she would have to like explain everything to me. And so just that language barrier to me was also a little bit kind of frustrating a bit. Yeah. And so I feel like maybe here in Tucson, or it would have been just a little bit more, it would have been a little bit easier, but a lot more expensive. So like a lot. Like we paid $7,000 in Mexico, and in Tucson, I believe it would have been like $20,000.
No, yeah, I was like looking it up and it was like 8,000 in Mexico, 25,000 in the United States. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, and then insurance doesn't cover any of that, so it just becomes like it's really hard. And so we, the OB here in Dr. Huran, he was like, I've worked with this doctor in Hermosillo before. He's great. She's great. I recommend. So that's why we decided to do that.
Since you brought up the topic of insurance, in other countries they do cover IVF fully. Would you like to see that happen here?
Absolutely, yes, because there are so many women out there that struggle. Mm-hmm. And I follow this girl on Instagram. I can't remember what her name is, but it's called Well We Wait. Mm-hmm. And she's done like 5 or 6 transfers, IVF transfers, and they've all been unsuccessful. And she lives in Wisconsin, and so that's a lot of money. That's a lot of medication. That's a lot of things that one person has to do to be able to have kids. Yeah. And so, yeah, it would be great if the insurance here would, cover it.
I wanted to include some clarification for this next part. So while I was interviewing this person, their mother happened to be with them, which I thought was really cool. So I did ask her thoughts on her daughter going through this journey, and here is what she had to say.
Oh my God, it was an emotional roller coaster. It's the worst. I can't even talk about it. No, I'm gonna cry. But it was very, very emotional, especially just, I was heavily medicated all the time. Yeah. Taking a bunch of medication. I had acne, my face had a little bit of acne, but the more I had it on my back, my stomach, I was a hot mess. No. I was a hot mess. And even after the fact, when I would get the negative results, because I would have to go get blood out because lab work done, and I would have to wait the 3 days, and those freaking 3 days were hell. Yeah. And then for the doctor to leave a voicemail or give me my results and say, Vanessa, I'm so sorry, but your lab results came back negative. Please stop all medication. So then I would have to stop all medication, everything, all injections, all anything I took, anything orally. So when I would have to stop medication, I would, bleed for a couple days. And instead of having my period for 5 days, 6 days, I swear it was like a week, 2 weeks.
So they would just make you stop taking the hormones and all the medication all at once, like there was no tapering off of it?
no, and they were like, stop all medication. So I would stop all. It was for hormones.
Yeah,
It's hormone medication. So I would just stop it. And literally, I would not bleed for like 2 days, and I'd be like, okay. And then that third day, it was like I would get my period, and it was just awful. Like there was times, Isabel, that I couldn't even get out of the shower. I would just cry in the shower.
No. Did you believe your experience with IVF was fair and that you at any time could decide to stop the treatment if you wanted?
Yes, absolutely. It was my decision throughout the entire time. So I actually wanted to keep going for the third time because I still had another option. However, my ex-husband was like, I think we should take a break. It's stressful. It's too much for us and stuff. So I ended up taking a break, and our plan was to go back in about a month or two. But then we got divorced, so we never went back.
Do you think if you guys had stayed, you would have kept doing it until it worked?
Honestly, I don't know. We were already kind of crumbling,
Mm-hmm.
so I think part of me thought that me doing this, I was gonna get pregnant and everything was gonna be fine. So it not working and him saying like, let's take a break. I was just like, okay, fine, let's take a break. And then within that next month and a half, I left my house. So I don't know. It kind of just all ended up playing out like that. I left my house, and before I knew it, we were done.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of blamed myself a lot
Mhm.
for it. I still do a little bit because I wasn't able to do what a woman is supposed to do. You know, we're supposed to be able to have children
Yeah.
and naturally and not have to go through all these extremes. So I don't know, I guess. And it's very weird because like my periods, Isabel, are on point
Uh-huh.
all the time.
Uh-huh.
Like I've never been irregular in my life.
Really?
Never. So I don't have it. Maybe I have a little bit of endometriosis, but it's never even been diagnosed. But yeah, my periods are painful. I have cramps. Yes, my periods do last me 5 to 7 days, but it's never been to where I've missed a period or I have some friends that are like, oh, it's been 3 months and I haven't gotten my period. I'm like, what? Like, literally,
No, that's crazy.
like, my calendar says, oh, your period is in 2 days. My period comes in 2 days.
So did the doctors ever say or give you a specific reason as to why you were struggling to get pregnant? Like, did they say, oh, blah, blah, blah is why you're having trouble?
They could never really give me an answer as to like this is what's going on. They had kind of referenced a little bit that maybe I was very acidic and that I was killing,
Mm-hmm.
sperm on contact. And then they did like a test on him to see if it was true. And so just things like that. And then my uterus supposedly is a little bit tilted because I have scoliosis.
Okay.
So that could have also been a reason to why I was struggling naturally. But they're like, well, you did IVF to where we implanted the embryo already in you. So I don't know. It just, I can't really give you a definite answer as to why I couldn't get pregnant because they couldn't even tell me why I couldn't.
Okay.
I'm stressed. Isabel, stress has a lot to do with it. And since my marriage was pretty much kind of crumbling already at this time.
Yeah, that just adds on.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. So we know that IVF was unsuccessful, but can you explain what that was like for you personally and also like with your family and your partner?
Well, I ended up getting divorced. So I feel like that also, it caused like a huge thing for us, even though he claims that it wasn't. But I feel like it caused a lot of our issues too, and it caused our separation. And I became very emotionless at this point. With all the medication, I became kind of like, well, this is my job as a woman. I'm supposed to be able to do this, and I wasn't. So I had like no sympathy, no empathy for anybody. Like, oh, you're sad? Yeah, how about you try giving yourself 10 shots in your stomach?
Yeah.
And then come crying to me.
Yeah.
Just I became like that. And so when he would tell me he was upset, I would look at him like, why are you upset?
Yeah.
Are you taking medication?
Yeah.
Are you injecting your stomach 10 times in the morning and 10 at night?
Yeah.
And so I became very dry.
Mm-hmm.
And that affected us too because he needed the comfort and the support too. And I was like, well, where's mine?
Yeah.
You're not going through this. I am. And it was like, well, I am going through this. Like, I have to see you go through this. And I'm like, yeah, well, guess what? You're not taking hormone medication to where you're all over the place.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was even kind of not nice to my parents too. I was very emotionless to everybody.
Next one, which kind of has to do with what you talked about, but what were the resources provided by your doctor to help you through your journey?
Yeah, so before you're able to do IVF, you have to talk to a counselor, and they need to make sure that, like, you understand what this process is, and you understand, like, that it might not work, and they just want to make sure that you're, sound, and it can, cause a lot of damage.
Yeah.
Right? So they make you see a counselor and they talk to you. They talk to, actually, they only talked to me. They didn't even talk to him, which they probably should have.
Yeah.
That could have also probably helped a little bit better to where they could have said, like, yes, you're going through this too, but the woman, she's the one that's struggling the most.
Yeah.
You need to support her, not.
Help him learn how to support you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe I would suggest, like, if the doctor doesn't provide the counselor for you, then they should automatically go with somebody just to talk about the ups and the downs that can happen and how the husband can be there, to support.
Yeah.
So your counselor was provided by your doctor?
Yeah, in Mexico it was.
Do you know in the U.S. if they make you do that?
You know what? I'm not sure if they do in the U.S. Since I only did the medicated IUIs, they didn't require anybody. But I don't know about the IVF here. That's good too.
Yeah.
To find out.
All right, your last question. Having been through this process, would you recommend IVF to a friend or ever try it again? And then why or why not?
I would recommend it to a friend, especially if I do know that they have been struggling for a long time. It's always good to know, like, your different options, whether it's having the medicated inseminations or doing in vitro, and just having the choice, right, to be able to do it is good. So yeah, I do recommend it. It is very hard, very, very hard emotionally, and I don't know, if for any reason I meet the love of my life and I still can't get pregnant, then I probably would try it again. And if not, then I don't know what my other measures would be.
You would still do it even, like, knowing the risk that you could, like, not become pregnant again?
I would, yeah, I would, just to see, because, maybe I was just, back then I was a different person, and now I'm a totally different person, so maybe it would work for me this time.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah. But I don't know about Mexico. I don't know if I would go back to Mexico.
Really? Did it feel like...
It wasn't bad. Like, I do recommend it. Like, I did have a good experience, like, with the doctors and stuff, but I don't know. I think I would much rather do it in the U.S. this time, just to be able to see, like, I worked on this side.
Yeah.
Like, might be a little bit more advanced or something.
Maybe. I don't know. But it's different. Like, because sometimes, people come here and there's no answers with the doctors here in the U.S., and then they go to Mexico and they have all the answers.
Yeah, that's true.
It just depends, but I would recommend it.
So that was my personal interview with somebody close to me about their personal journey through IVF. Before we finish this episode, I did want to focus on a few things that were talked about throughout the interview. So as she shared, she had to go get treatment in Mexico due to the price. And I just think from a bioethics standpoint that this is something to really think about. I think it shows that there is a lack of access. Not only did she not have any clinics in her hometown that could help her, but also the cost is so crazy that she went to a different country. And she also talked about the language barrier there and how that made it even more frustrating and hard for her. And this is a reality for a lot of women here who cannot afford IVF care and have to go to other countries, but they want a family so bad that they will go. And even though they may not understand exactly what is happening due to the language barrier, they still go. And I think that that could lead to a lot of ethics issues when a patient is not informed on what is happening. She also talked about how she did receive therapy, which I was really shocked to find. But again, her treatment was in Mexico. I did try to find information on if this was what happened in the US, but I could not find any info on it. And she shared how her partner did not get therapy, which I also thought was very interesting because they also are going through it. They also are having the mental effects of this, although they may not have the physical effects. And that is something that they could definitely benefit from. And he definitely did struggle not having the same access to counseling as she did. One thing I personally took away from this interview, or like the main thing that I learned from talking to somebody who's gone through this, because I personally haven't, is how women really are struggling when they're going through this. And I think that it's something we as a society don't like to talk about and kind of just like to brush under the rug, and we shouldn't. It's really something that's mentally and physically hard. It can make them feel like a failure when they're not, and we need to be uplifting these individuals that are going through things like this and are having trouble trying to start a family, because it's not easy and it can have a negative impact on them and their relationships, not only with other people but with themselves. I think that if we are able to educate not only women but everyone on what this process is like, or even the other processes during a fertility journey, and we don't shame people for going through things like that or make them feel shameful, that could really benefit everybody. And I hope that that is able to happen in the future. I also think just education and being informed on the different procedures and treatments you can get for fertility are important, because what my interviewee told me that she had tried before IVF, I had never heard about. And as a woman myself, I'm kind of shocked at that. And then lastly, I wanted to just focus on the overall takeaway, which I hope is that IVF affects women a lot more than we think. We always think about the mental effects, but we don't think about the physical effects, and the way that taking these people off hormones can really affect them, on top of having the mental effects of this treatment. Also, how deeply it can affect family, friends, people who themselves are not getting treatment. I think that this conversation just kind of gets skipped over or is not had. We heard her mom talking and she was very emotional, and I think that just shows how deeply it affects everyone around you. I did want to thank my interviewee for participating and sharing her story and being so vulnerable, because I know that that could not have been easy. Anyways, stay tuned for next week, where Sophie, Natalie, Annika, and I will be having a roundtable discussion talking about all of our episodes and kind of the main points of them, and just deep diving into what we learned throughout this podcast and this project, and just kind of tying up all the loose ends. But thanks so much for listening. I hope to see you guys next week. Bye.